Welcome to Pain Management 103. This is the third lecture in a series of lectures that are structured around pain management. And in this specific lecture, we will be learning about pathophysiology of pain. So here let's look at the conceptual pain model. All I want you to know from this slide is that there are many different models of pain, but all of these pain models essentially convey the same information, that in order to perform cognition or evaluation of pain, in order for your brain to recognize that the sensation that you're feeling right now is actually pain, there are different components to that process, and that's a sensory processing component, motivation and effect, and then cognition and evaluation. And this is how you perceive pain. So let's actually look at the four elements of pain processing, and let's go through them together so that you understand how does pain get transmitted in your body, what happens to the pain signal from the time that you burn your hand on a stove to the time where your brain consciously recognizing that this sensation that I'm currently feeling is a feeling of pain, what stages of pain processing actually do occur. So there's four elements that you should be aware about. The first element is a transduction. Transduction basically refers to an event when a nauseous stimulus is being converted to the action potential. Sounds like a gibberish here, so let me explain to you what I mean by that. So what is a nauseous stimulus? It's something that causes tissue injury. For example, a mechanical stimulus is when you hit your foot with a hammer if you're doing some kind of construction project around the house. So you accidentally hit your foot, and that would be a mechanical nauseous stimulus. A thermal stimulus would be if you accidentally burn your hand on a stove when you're cooking. That's a thermal stimulus. So all of those stimuli actually cause tissue damage. Right, so what happens is, basically, in order for you to perceive pain or to recognize the sensation of pain, you need to be able to transfer that information from the peripheral nervous system where this tissue damage happened, from your foot or from your hand, to the brain where the understanding or cognition of pain occurs. And that's basically done via action potential or via transmission of electrical potential from the peripheral nervous system to the central nervous system. So during transduction, of the first stage of the pain processing, the stimuli is being converted to an electrical potential so that the signal can be transmitted to the brain. During transmission, this is actually when you transmit the signal from the peripheral nervous system to the central nervous system via different nerve cells, and these are going to be called first, second, and third order neurons. Modulation basically speaks for itself. This is when you alter the signal that's been transmitted in some way. Maybe you are going to inhibit it, maybe you're going to amplify the signal, and this is usually happening in the spinal cord. And perception, this is when you integrate that pain signal into your somatosensory and limbic cortex, and this is when your brain basically is recognizing, hey, the sensation that I'm currently feeling is a sensation of pain. So let's look at the structure of a neuron or a nerve cell. So here we have a cell body, and you can see that from the cell body there are different protrusions that are sticking out. So these little ones are called dendrites, and these are going to be protrusions that receive signals, versus an axon, it's this really, really long, slender projection of a nerve cell. And what this one does, this one is the one that's going to transmit the signal. So basically, the neuron is going to conduct the electrical impulses away from the cell body to the spinal cord and to the brain. And this is done via an axon. And this is done because this is how the pain signal is being transmitted, via the electrical impulses or potentials. And we just talked about that. And then just look at this little squares on the axon. I want you to pay attention to them. So this little squares of the coating, it's called a myelin sheath. Not all neurons are going to have them. What it allows basically neuron to do, it's a special coding that's basically going to allow neuron to transmit the signals more rapidly. So let's look at the injury and how the pain signal is going to be transmitted. So this slide basically represents a global picture, and I want you to understand it. So let's say you hit your foot with this hammer. What's going to happen? So at the site of the injury, right here, there are different processes that are molecular processes that are going to happen. Well, first of all, the cells of the immune system are all going to come together to where the injury happened, and they're going to release different inflammatory cytokines, different chemical messengers, different signals. And these signals are basically going to affect the nerve endings in some way. And what's going to happen is the nerve endings are going to be basically depolarized, and an action potential via an electrical potential will be generated. Then the nerves are going to transmit the pain signal from the peripheral nervous system to the brain, to the central nervous system. And this is done via first, second, and third order neurons. And then when the neurons come together, there are these little sites that are called junctions. This is how neurons communicate with one another. They sort of come together at the sites. And at the sites, one neuron is going to transmit the signal to the second neuron, and it's going to be done via different molecular neurotransmitters. So let's look at the sensory transduction. You can see that there are different kinds of fibers that actually transmit the signal. For example, these are alpha delta fibers and these are C fibers. You can see that alpha delta fibers are myelinated. They have that little square sheath or coating on them, and they conduct the signal of pain very rapidly, which is why they're the ones that are going to transmit this first pain, that first initial sensation that you're feeling, that hyperalgesia that you feel when you injure yourself. And then C fibers, these transmit the signals more slowly because they don't have that myelin sheath or that myelin coat. So they are going to be the ones responsible for that feeling of secondary pain, or that dull, achy after feeling that you have after you injure yourself. So the first pain is very sharp, immediately unpleasant, but then the second pain comes on and it's that dull, achy sensation. So what are some of the chemical mediators of transmission and transduction, like I already talked to you about? At the site of the tissue injury, the cells of the immune system are going to come together. These are macrophages, mast cells, lymphocytes, and what they're basically going to do is they're going to release different algogenic substances, or different neurotransmitters, or different chemical mediators, and these are going to act on the nerves. And they're going to act on the nerves, and what's going to happen is you're going to have C fibers, or different fibers, that are going to be sensitized by these chemicals, and that will lead to primary hyperalgesia, or hyperalgesia feeling, which is a definition of the exaggerated response to pain at the site of injury. And then lastly, let's look at the perception of pain. All I want you to understand here is that there's not one single region in a pain that's responsible for interpretation of pain signal and forming that conscious understanding. So if you look at thalamus, it's not like you can just point to one and say, okay, well, this is thalamus, this is where the pain cognition occurs. Actually, the pain cognition is thought to occur in 5 different structures in the brain. Collectively, they're called pain matrix, and these structures are going to be the structures that collectively form the perception of pain. I can tell you that one of the structures is amygdala. And you probably heard about amygdala. Amygdala is basically the part of the brain that's responsible for forming memories, decision making, also processing of emotional reactions. In fact, it's fascinating because there's a lot of studies done on animals that basically what happens is one of the parts of the brains is removed, and then scientists are trying to figure out what happens to the animal. How is its personality altered? So when scientists removed amygdala from the brain of cats, the cats become actually hyper aggressive and attack things. But just understand that pain perception does not happen in a single region of the brain. It actually happens in several different structures. So this concludes the end of this lecture. Thank you so much, and we will be moving forward to the next lecture.